Hi, I'm Eric Mien and this is Breaking New Ground. Thanks for watching. If you watch this program regularly, you'll know that we are not scared to ask some tough questions around housing. This time around, we've opened the space for some experts to ask questions and get answers from one of the topmost officials in the housing department. Welcome to our panel discussion. In the hot seat this time around is the National Director General of Housing, Itumeleng Kutswane. And amongst our experts tonight, we have Professor Edgar Pieterse, who's a Professor of Urban Policy at the University of Cape Town. We also have Anthea Houston, who comes from the Development Action Group. They facilitate the building of housing for the poor. We also have Mary Simons, who is an academic at UCT, and Siabonga Mkwanazi, who writes for the independent newspapers. Welcome all.
Thank you, thank you.
Over the last few weeks, we've traveled across the country to look at what cities are doing to meet the BNG strategy of housing delivery in the country. Take a look at this. What I find most interesting about Mdantsane, the area we're in now, is it was chosen by the president in 2001 as a high priority node because of the high rate of crime and unemployment. Now, one of the ways in which you can make an inroad and improve these conditions is provide housing. Now, that's why they have this huge urban renewal project. We're going to talk to Martin Thursby right now and hear how they're doing. So how many houses are you looking to build here in the end?
Phase 1 is 500, phase 2 is 2,000.
And how many families do you envision to accommodate here in the end?
There's about 1,800 sharing houses units, every 1,800 from Tanzania. And within the project, there's a number of shack dwellers, about 600.
Okay. Now, the reason we're going to the N2 Gateway project is because it's one of the most ambitious in the country with a view to building about 30,000 units. So that should be exciting.
N2 Gateway is a national pilot project where we are piloting the integrated sustainable human settlement. The notion is that gone are the days where you have areas earmarked for colored people, for black people, for rich or for poor. We are saying now, let us integrate communities.
The car manufacturing industry is one of the key drivers of the Eastern Cape economy and that of Port Elizabeth, which is why car manufacturing companies like General Motors, through their General Motors South Africa Foundation, are getting involved together with government in the upliftment of communities through housing. Sakasonke, just up the road where we're going, is a great example of this cooperation between government and the private sector. Now, what you're telling me is you are building 10 square meters bigger houses than the basic BNG house for less money.
Absolutely. And the secret is densification.
Yeah.
If you make the sites smaller, you've got more money for the houses.
And
look at the standard of the services.
And it doesn't feel cramped to me. What I find amazing is it doesn't feel cramped.
No,
it
absolutely.
feels like everybody's got room around them. Right here on the outskirts of the city of Durban is the historic area of Katomena, where thousands of people were forcibly removed some years back, but came back to live in shacks because the place was so centrally located. They could walk to work and back. Now it has been changed into one of the model examples of an integrated human settlement. So we'll just go there and see what it's like. Are you happy with what's going on in Katomena?
Definitely. There's lots of opportunities for people and with every development it can be 50 sites, 100, 200 sites. If you look around in Katomena, you find that there's too much of integration. You've got too many kinds of too many types of development, which I think in the earlier visions no one have ever imagined that it will come up this way.
Functioning partnerships give better results and the partners involved are much happier, which brings us to today's program on public-private partnerships in housing. Cosmos City is one good example of that.
It's important that you ensure that within the development, these different communities can share certain facilities, things like schools, crèches, playgrounds. You know, if you start having the children playing together, you force their parents to come together to the playground, and therefore the playground becomes a sort of a platform where these different communities can engage.
A lot of trucks and people move through Polokwane on the way to the rest of Africa and back. As a result, there's been a lot of investment in infrastructure development and upgrading. But housing still has to catch up, with about 15% of Polokwane residents living in shacks and informal settlements, which is why the municipality, together with the city, have started a number of housing developments.
So far, we have managed to complete 508 units because this project was allocated 1,000 units.
So you are on 508. Is that like what, phase one?
Yeah, it's phase one because it's divided into 2 phases.
And then the second phase will be to finish all 1,000?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on BNG and clarifying all that.
Okay, thank you.
To kick off the discussion, Director General, I thought maybe you should give us a quick overview of what the department has done so far as you approach the end of your term, so to speak.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. I will just cast my mind back to 2004 when we brought in BNG, which is very important. It's been a very important policy instrument to begin to deal with the issues of space, but also to help us to increase housing delivery. We have been able to attend to issues of rectification of houses that were built before 2004. We have also been able to develop very interesting policy, in particular the policy on inclusionary housing. So in the nutshell, I think those will be the key highlights of this government from 2004 to 2009.
You know, do you guys feel that you have, delivered enough numbers given your mandate for the 4 years, 5 years?
When the BNG was approved in 2004, at that time, housing department was sort of producing 150, 160,000 houses per annum. Ever since, we have increased that number to about 270,000 per annum, which is, in my view, an achievement. But obviously, there are still some challenges that are there. And if you look back, if you start counting from 1994 to date, we have been able to build 2.6 million houses and housed almost 10 million South Africans. I think that is really an achievement of a country of our size.
Siamong.
The government plan, as I understand it, that by 2014, we should have moved those people from informal settlement and put up proper structures. How realistic, are we in terms of being able to attain that in the next, in the next 6 years, or so, looking at the massive backlog that you have and trying to, at the same time, put proper structures in those informal settlements? How realistic is that?
The Millennium Development Goal, in terms of shelter, clearly says that countries, nations must be able to have halved the number of people who live in the informal settlement. And we then said in South Africa that we have 2014 as our target. And we are mindful of many other challenges. Financial challenges are there. But obviously, the growing number of, mobility of our people from rural areas to urban centers, we are mindful of that. But we are saying that we have determined 2014 to be the goal that we should all work towards. It is important that we should bring all other role players into the party. Whether that will be achieved is something else, but at least we must begin to work towards something. And currently, with the programs that we have introduced within the housing fold, informal settlement upgrading programs, for instance, social housing, and so forth, we think that we will be able to get somewhere. Everything being equal, everybody coming into the picture, yes, that is achievable.
Professor Peterson?
Let's say we do get the housing right, we actually get it to people. The problem is once people get the house, they've got to maintain it. And that house shouldn't become a liability for them, but should be an asset. And the evidence so far suggests that a lot of the houses we have provided, of the 2.5 million that you said we've achieved, which by international standards is a phenomenal achievement, there's no question about that. Because of a high unemployment rate, actually becomes a liability for people, and that sets in train a whole series of further problems. So what I want to put to you is that haven't we come to the point where we really have to step back and think from first principles again, whether we are framing the problem in the right way by suggesting informal settlements and slums must be eradicated, and even in a context where we are not making a dent in unemployment? And shouldn't we be broadening this discussion to think of a range of different interventions? That's just a question.
Housing is but part of a basket of social services that government is providing, and I think that is very key. There are many other instruments that are there in different departments, EPWP, for instance, social grant, either for the kids and or for the for the aged and so forth. Those are some of the interventions that are there. So housing is just part of that. But we are saying that there has got to, people must have shelter. They must be sheltered. As much as we provide other immediate remedies to the conditions under which our people live, but they must have shelter. But also you also need to work towards having functional cities and towns in order to allow both mobility but also the growing of the economy and of course hopefully creating jobs in the same time. So we see housing as a catalyst in development. It is not the only one, but we see it as a catalyst.
Yeah, Limpopo is actually, from what we've gathered on the ground, leading the charge in terms of skilling people, whereas there are provinces that are saying bring in the big players because the little players are letting us down. Limpopo, on the other hand, says we've skilled those people. They were bad, we've trained them, now they've gone better. Why can't that be transferred onto all the other provinces?
We have had some challenges in terms of our PHP program, and I'm sure you can say more about that. There are areas where we admit what was supposed to be an ideal program to engage not only the communities but the beneficiaries themselves to build houses for themselves. It sort of got hijacked somehow. You ended up with something called developers-driven PHP. You can't have that, because you then disempower the potential beneficiaries and so forth. We are looking at that and trying to reorganize it in such a way that it is indeed an involving process involving both beneficiaries and communities. We have been able to recruit some of the engineers in Cuba, for instance, are working in different programs in different provinces on this particular project. And I think they're doing well in terms of skilling people. Now, when we come to the urban center, the magnitude of migration will not necessarily allow a slow process that will otherwise follow in terms of the PHP, because it's quite involved, it's slow. People bring their sweat equity in whatever form and so forth. So in the urban space, the pressure is so much that that process will actually compound the situation even more. But of course, there is a commitment to reskilling, and you are correct, Eric. In Limpopo, through the PHP, for instance, in rural areas, we are beginning to see people being skilled, in technical skills on construction and so on.
And it's also happening in terms of small developers actually getting skilled to work where it's not PHP,
of
which
course,
I find
yes,
quite interesting.
Yes.
But still talking about numbers and delivery, one of the problems that people constantly talk about is the fact that they have to wait forever, 10 years, 12 years to get their houses. I know that everything you've mentioned up to now is geared towards maybe solving that problem, because the more houses you build, the quicker you build them, the shorter the waiting period. But are there other things that the department is doing to alleviate this kind of problem?
Eric, we need to build 560,000 houses per annum. That is really very key. And both private sector and government combined, we are producing less than 350,000 houses. So there is always a shortfall. And there is also an increasing number of backlog, as it were.
But that should sum it up in terms of what you need to do. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us as we continue with this discussion. Welcome back as we continue to grill the Director General of Housing in the National Department. Let's talk about the Housing Development Agency. What is interesting about it for me is how is it going to be successful where the government has failed in terms of accessing land?
The HDA has been created to acquire land and to be involved in development. And these are two critical objectives of the agency. The intention is to have this agency to be able to create space for other players in the private sector to come on board in terms of housing development. We have been able to get the banks on board through social contract. They committed to spend 42 billion rands by the end of this year. They are at about 36 billion rands as we speak. But obviously, the question that has been raised from time to time is that there is no stock in South Africa to allow your gap housing potential beneficiaries to move in. Now, one of the challenges is the question of well-located land. And of course, the whole intention of beginning to deal with the special planning in South Africa. So the HDA, we think, is going to be able to help government to achieve its goals as contained in the BNG in a big way. Land is key, and of course, allowing other people to play a role.
How will it do it? Will it be given a lot of money to buy land? Is it going to be given how is it going to do it, the HDA?
Well, in the first instance, Eric, we are looking at the state land. We are looking at the parastatals land. There is some work that has been done to try to understand the ownership of some of portions of land, well-located land. We don't want land that is at the periphery. We don't want to put the poor far away from the urban center, from the economic activity. So we think that the HDA will then be able to take that land, and then it is going to be capitalized, yes.
I think the department should be congratulated for recognizing the shortcomings in deliveries, particularly around capacity, and for taking measures to address that, which I think forming the development agency is one such measure. But in the past, the National Department of Housing has not appropriately, I think, managed housing agencies and housing institutions. There's been huge problems with accountability. And with the agencies not fulfilling their mandates, but spending their budget year on year and getting more budget in subsequent years. So I'm interested to hear what we have learned from this experience and how we are setting up this new agency in a way that doesn't lead to the same outcomes.
Excellent question. Well, issues of accountability, I think, are critical, are very important, particularly for our state agencies generally. What we have done, drawing from the lessons of the past, was to make sure that the manner in which the board of the agency will be appointed, the role of the department, the role of cabinet, the role of the Minister of Housing as an overseer is clearly explained, and obviously the accountability of that agency to Parliament, because at the end of the day, it's been established through a legislation, and therefore the accountability will also be in Parliament. We have made sure that its conduct must be in such a way that we really avoid the pitfalls of the past. And the minister will, for instance, give targets to the agency to meet every 3 years or every 5 years, And of course, those targets will be communicated with Parliament. There will be an oversight by Parliament, and also from internally, we'll be able to monitor the achievement or failure of achievement of those targets. That's one of the things, standards and norms and so forth.
Mary?
Given the time period that we take to amend legislation, absolutely a priority is to get the municipalities' provincial government on board. I presume, being the fascist that I am at times, that I really would like to see some intervention on this matters that refuses that any land, if you like, allocated in this period that you're talking about, that is, if you like, given over by municipalities and state authorities, should be declared null and void.
Was that a sunset clause problem?
Well, of course, yes, that was the issue. But in relation to the state land, I think there is a commitment from departments which are part of which will be part of the agency. We're also beginning to see provinces coming on board and saying that we do have these parcels of land. Don't you think that they can be used for human settlement purposes? We are seeing a very interesting pattern, really, of all government, government as a whole, realizing the need, the centrality of sustainable human settlement. To put people at peripheries, Eric, is to create more social problems for us. And I think that is really the greatest challenge that we are faced with at this stage.
There's a year to go, Director General, before this administration probably gets shuffled or changed. What are you guys going to prioritize as you hit the twilight of this term?
Eric, South Africa needs rental stock. We really need rental stock, and it is the intention of government to upscale delivery of rental stock. Of course, we are left with 8 months, not 12 months. But going forward, we think that we need to increase rental stock for the lower income groups as well as the middle income groups. You see what interest rates are doing. Interestingly, we're beginning to see some people buying houses of the poor, in some of the urban centers. So creation of rental stock in the market, I think, is very key.
Okay, so that's what to be prioritized.
Obviously, yes. Enough money has been put aside through our social housing program, and we will be going that route.
Join us again next week at the same time on Monday at 10 p.m. right here on SABC2. So long.